everybody, it's Joe Parrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your gun dog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your gun dog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Founded Fetch. This week, we're going to be talking all about the importance of keeping your cool when working with your gun dog. Joining me for this week's podcast is LWDG Group expert Claire Denier. How are you today, Claire?
Well, hello, Joe. I'm good. My voice might sound a little bit odd. I have had a bit of a virus for a couple of weeks, so I do apologise if I'm a bit croaky, but yeah, other than that, I'm fine.
We wanted to talk about this topic because obviously this week is very relevant with everything we're seeing in the news about welfare with animals in sport. And I think sometimes we lose our temper or lose our relationship or understanding of our dogs quickly when we are trying to reach a goal. So I want us to talk about how we can reach our goal with our gun dogs without getting to a point where we feel we need to resort to harsh handling. So let's start with talking about some of the passion and some of the challenges we have when working with our gun dogs, because we are, on the majority, quite determined, aren't we?
Yeah, I think depending on your goal, everyone has goals with their gun dog, regardless of what that goal is. It might be to work on a shoot. It might be that they want to do working tests. It might be that they want them to walk on a loose lead when they go for a country walk. Whatever that goal is, it's a goal. And when we put goals in place, we can get so fixated on achieving those goals that we can forget that we are working with another species. A dog doesn't speak English, and we can forget that the relationship between the dog and the handler should be a partnership. And I think so when you have those goals, it's great to have things you want to achieve, but not to the detriment of the relationship between you and your dog.
We were just discussing before we started recording. I was telling you, I've come off my bike and wanted to break my bike into 1,000 pieces, because when you are hurt or angry or lost control of your emotional intelligence, everything can seem to be against us. And I know we've talked about, I don't like my dog at the moment, but it's really important for us to stress, isn't it, the positive handler-dog relationship, how critical that is to you achieving your goals.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And what we were discussing before we started recording was, I think because we know that dogs live in the moment, we forget that dogs learn through habit or through patterns of behaviour. Now, that although dogs live in the moment, if you look at what we've just said there, if your dog has been overly corrected, too harshly corrected in a certain situation, circumstance, or exercise, and the dog then remembers that in that context, although your dog lives in the moment, if you put that dog back in that context again, there is a likelihood and a very strong chance that you could have damaged that part of the chain in the behavior or the exercise that you're training, because it's almost like PTSD. The dogs, I remember a very negative connotation to this scenario, this exercise, and I don't like the outcome of that. It's what we call a one-time learning event with a dog, and it's a real thing, and it can happen positively and it can happen negatively. It can take just one thing, that one time, to create such an emotional response in that dog that it is, as I say, like PTSD. The dog remembers that they didn't feel good in that situation or scenario previously. And so although people can often brush off things because they go, oh, dogs live in the moment, but then forgetting that we also have one-time learning events. And so the dog can suffer an ongoing problem which could create behavioural problems because of that experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think that the difficulty that we all face, and we must keep this at the forefront of our mind, is we as a group consistently say there has to be a leader, not an alpha, but there has to be a leader. You have to guide your dog in that partnership. But with leadership comes great responsibility, and that responsibility is not to use that power of position in a way that is negative on the dog. So there's the impact of losing our temper. It completely ruins the training process going forward.
Yeah. So the training process should be like building a house from the foundations up, layer by layer, brick by brick. We're building something with the dog. And so very often things that cause people to lose their temper is when they haven't accounted for, let's say, distractions that the dog isn't used to working around. So something that the handler, owner, or even trainer feels that dog can do, maybe the new environment is a new distraction, so the dog then can't perform that behavior or action under those circumstances, but that's not accounted for. The dog did it at home, so it should be able to do it here. And so what happens is you get frustration because you know the dog can do it, and that's when people tend to lose their temper, or they get so frustrated with the dog they almost throw their baby out of the pram. I think that's the right saying that I'm coming up with there. And they just blame the dog and maybe behave in a way they wouldn't normally behave with that dog, through frustration or through embarrassment even, especially in a group class. The amount of times I hear about things that happen in group classes which can not only just affect that dog in that moment, but perhaps affect the other dogs in the group if they're super sensitive to what's going on 2 dogs down the line. And people don't put enough thought and consideration into that.
I watched the video of the Olympic rider, and I gotta be honest, it annoyed me because I was expecting it to be this huge loss of temper. And not that I again would ever condone it, but I can appreciate a moment of stupidity. But this wasn't that. This was harsh abuse, without a shadow of a doubt. There was no need for it, but there was also no consideration given to the animal's body language. The horse was absolutely showing stress, frustration, all those things, and their answer or response was almost, "We'll beat it out of them." And I just thought, why would you choose that way? Why would you choose that way forward? Because we have to take on board what the dogs are telling us.
Yeah, I watched the video too, Joe, and I actually watched it twice because I thought I must be missing something, because I felt, and this is just my opinion, my humble opinion, I felt like she looked too comfortable with what she was doing. Like you said, she didn't look to me like she had just suddenly lost her temper. But what I also couldn't figure out, that I was desperately trying to figure out, was, what are you trying to teach the horse in this moment? And it's no different to what we see going on in the harsher side of the Gundog community, where what do you think the dog is going to learn from what you're now doing? How is the dog supposed to learn anything like that? And that is the same as what I saw in that equine video. I couldn't work out how she could look so comfortable, but also what on earth the horse was supposed to be learning from the punishment that was being put upon the horse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I felt the horse's language back was, without making our podcast over 18,
Equine.
Yeah, the horse was not a submissive horse. The horse was, keep doing it, and I ain't going to give a shite of what's going on. I'm going to just keep on. They're not even the dog, not even the horse was misbehaving. You could just see there was almost they created almost a standoff situation where it was one against the other. And that you see sometimes with people and their dogs. A dog will go one of two ways when it's being harshly handled regularly. It'll either become incredibly submissive, or it'll become as angry as the person who's been angry with them.
100%. I worked with a dog. John and I worked with a dog a few years ago. Now, the lady had taken this dog to another trainer who was, I'm not even going to call it traditional. It was harsh. There's no other word for it. It was harsh. And the dog, he then refused to work with the dog ever again because the dog retaliated. And that's the thing that I suppose he didn't expect to happen. He probably expected submission, the dog to submit to him, and that didn't happen. Now, it took us a really long time to rebuild that dog's confidence, but there were certain things that the dog would never be 100% comfortable with. And you could see that if you raised your hand the wrong way, if you moved your arm too quickly, things like that. You can see when the dog has experienced something. And that's why I say it's almost like PTSD, because even 2 years down the line, although that dog went on to be incredible and amazing, and he really was, that he still didn't trust fully. So to say dogs live in the moment and they just get over things is actually incorrect. Yes, they live in the moment, in that actual moment with you, but that doesn't mean that things don't have a long-lasting effect.
When I had Ella's mum, Jess, Dad bought her, I think she was 18 months, 2-year-old, something like that. And she came to us. She was very nervous around men. One of the reasons my dad gave it to her, in the kennel, she would go to the back of the kennel and she wouldn't come out. She literally wouldn't come out. And Dad was like, I can't do anything with her. Beautiful dog, incredibly well bred. Probably, I don't know her past completely, but probably used or wanted to use in a very high level, maybe like tests or trials, and she'd, for whatever reason, failed the mark. And that dog would do anything for me. After she lived in our home for years, and she was always great to anything. And I take her out beating, and she would be fine around the sound of shot. But if she saw a gun, she would become almost petrified. And in the house, if she put herself, like you have like kitchens with a U-shaped like tops, if she put herself in that corner of the kitchen and we walked in, and we'd never lost her temper there, she would fly past us at such speed to get herself out of a corner. And it used to be heartbreaking to watch. And I would always say to my dad, what has someone done to her? What is it about being a gun or being in a corner, like everything in her behavior? Like, I don't know what the episode or episodes were, but a dog that could have done so much more had she been treated kindly, would, whatever they were trying to get out of her, they would have got out of her. She was so biddable. She wanted to do everything for you. She literally would bust her heart for you. And I'm thinking, why do people think that this loss of temper, this anger, this thing is ever going to get the best out of anything?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And I suppose there's just this really old-fashioned viewpoint, isn't there, that you have to be the alpha and the dog has to respect you and the dog has to understand its place and all of this. Actually, I had to think of it more that actually your dog's leader and guide in life. And if you think about what leadership actually means, it's not an aggressive thing. It's just a guidance. It's like being a parent figure. And if you said to people, would you do that to their child? They'd say no. And it's like, you've got to think more about the message you're relaying to that dog, because you want, at the end of the day, if you look at a working gun dog, you're a partnership. You are a partnership. You're working as a team. Teamwork can only truly exist if there's trust. There has to be trust in a team. If that trust is broken, is the dog working for you through fear, or is it working for you because you're a team? And I think that's where there has to be a very clear definition of what that means.
I know it myself. I can get frustrated when I'm out training. I'm not going to ever pretend I don't. But I'm also emotionally intelligent enough to know that my physical signs of my tempers go in, or the emotional signs of my tempers go in, and also to step away. So that might be put the dog calmly back into like the back of the car and just walk away, breathe, shake it off almost, and just let it go. And if I'm at a point where I'm thinking, and very rarely do I even think I even get to this point now, the more I've learned about dogs, but if I get to a point where I'm thinking, oh, I can't let this go, then my dad always told me, if you're feeling like that, take the dog back. For him, who's always put it back in the kennel. For me, put it back in the house and leave the training session, because nothing is going to come of it. And I think that
No.
listening, for our members, you've got to know your emotional stress, your emotional signs of stress, but also know how to calm yourself down before you even try to deal with fixing the situation.
Absolutely. And like you, Joe, if I ever am doing a training session and it is going really badly wrong and I can feel frustration building, I just stop the session. I just stop. Now, I appreciate that if you're in a group class situation, maybe that's not quite so possible. However, you could just sit the next retrieve out and take a few moments just to make up with your dog and remake friends with your dog and be like, I know this hasn't gone exactly as we wanted, but let's try again in a moment. There's no harm in doing that, or walking the dog away and having a few moments. Like, at the end of the day, as a trainer, for me, if I'm teaching on a one-to-one, if I can see or sense that a handler is frustrated, I will really work hard to lighten the mood, to try and bring them into a better state of mind for training the dog. And if they say to me that they've had a really stressful day or something like that, I'm like, do you know what? Let's make today's session really fun. If I'm teaching a group, then I will try and look at everybody that's within the group. And if I can see that someone's struggling, or I can see that someone's being frustrated, I will advise them to take 5 minutes, take your dog over there, take them for a toilet break, give yourself 5 minutes, just de-stress, come back to the group in a moment, because people need that time to decompress. So just because they're in a training environment or training situation, they shouldn't be trying to push through that, because you can't. I don't think you can push through that if you're feeling that frustrated. You need that time to decompress. So in whatever way that can be done, the trainer is also responsible for that. So as well as the owner having, or the handler having to take ownership of that, when they're training their dog solo, trainers also need to take responsibility for seeing this happening within a training environment and be able to advise people on how to train their dog without feeling like that. I think that is part of a trainer's job. It has to be.
I completely agree with you. And I think, like, we've done loads of podcasts and we've got loads of training on like the importance of positive reinforcement and building trust and motivation. But alongside that, we have lots of stuff on like how to correct disobedience without harsh methods. That's really incredibly important. Like, and managing like strong prey drives and how to focus your dog. The things that we know are going to be probably obstacles at some point for our members. We give them the tools to know how to overcome the obstacles without them losing their temper. But I also think we've lost members, and it's been sad to watch, where the need for the dog to be perfect has meant that they have started resorting to harsher and harsher methods to reach the goal. And I cannot understand it for 1 minute, where however much you want something, that you will go to that point with another living creature who you want to win so badly that you will beat something into behaving the way you want it to.
100%. I would rather get a com and know that I've trained my dog in a kind, compassionate way than get a first place through a dog working for me through fear. Genuinely, I feel like that. But as you've raised that, Joe, I think you have to understand your own emotions. Last year, I planned that this year I was going to smash it out with working tests. As much, you know, my story with working tests. I've done okay. My dogs get good scores. I've got a couple of rosettes. I haven't won anything yet. But anyway, last year I decided this year I was going to go for it. However, stuff then happened in life. Sadly, we lost Rose puppies and she had a period of grieving and mourning herself. I didn't deal with that brilliantly well, so I wasn't in a great mindset. Then she came into season, had another phantom pregnancy. So I've been dealing with that and working out, when do I spay her? When do I do the best thing? So at the forefront of my entire dog ownership, which is what it is with Rose, but also my relationship with her, I've had to put her well-being and her mental health, is the way to put it, as well as my own, above that goal. That goal was never going to happen this year with those things that had happened. Her mindset wasn't right. Her physical well-being wasn't right. My mindset wasn't right to strive forward and achieve those goals. I made the decision that until we've got all of those things sorted and until she is in a better place and ready, and I am in a better place and ready, work and tests are not the be all and end all of that relationship with my dog. My relationship with that dog is built on trust and built on us having fun together. And she's an incredible dog and she's super skilled. And why would I put more pressure on top of a lot of things that were out of my control that added pressure, to then just turn up and maybe then get frustrated because she wasn't performing her best because of outside influences in her life and mine that we don't have control of. So I've had to take check on that and be very aware of my emotions and what she's been through and going through and what she's about to go through. And so I've made that decision because I don't want to put pressure on her that creates frustration for her or me. So that's me as a handler putting her well-being first. And that was quite a big decision to make. After last year, I made the decision that this year was the year. And I think sometimes as a handler, we have to do that.
Yeah, fully. And it's about, you've set realistic expectations last year and then you've changed them. Like I always say to people, don't call them goals, call them intentions, because intentions can change and you don't feel like it was a pass or fail type of experience. My intention was to do this, but life has changed that. Now my intention is to do this. But the importance, I think, for our members, I think we drill it into them with our Monday morning mindset, is this group mentality that creating a calm and enjoyable training atmosphere is going to get you the best result. Anything else is not going to give you the optimum chance of getting what you want.
Absolutely. And I think this is the important thing about the group, is we are creating that. If you look at the ladies within our membership, the ladies within the society, they genuinely care about each other and about each other's journeys with their dogs. And then you've got yourself and myself, yourself and myself and Jem and Sam and the other experts. We are all on the same wavelength in that the relationship with the dog should be built on trust. It should be a positive relationship and that we support one another. And the amount of support that goes on in that society group without any of us having to prompt it, it's a culture. It's now a way of life in that membership, that everyone within that membership is rooting for each other and there's no judgment and people can ask any question. And when the training's gone, we celebrate with each other. And when the training's gone wrong, we commiserate with each other and support each other without judgment. And I think when you're in a community like that, there is actually less risk of becoming frustrated and angry as a handler, because there's no embarrassment and there's no, oh, what will my peers think? We have none of that within our group. We share and we support, whether it's good or bad.
And I think that sort of culture, like you said, of knowing the training is going to require patience, the training is going to require consistency. You're absolutely right. Yeah. It removes so much frustration straight away because you already can relax and enjoy the training without that fear of, oh my God, I need to get this done immediately. It has to be perfect immediately. And I do think your culture, the people around you doing what you're doing, your community is incredibly important to this, because I do agree with some of the things that we've seen in the news about why have you waited till a week before the Olympics to bring this out? This happened 4 years ago. I fully agree.
Yeah.
Because the person who was bringing it out, if you were absolutely concerned about animal welfare, for 4 years, this could have been happening to other horses and other riders. There's somebody sitting there while she's walloping that horse, and there's a rider on top who's having to deal with all those emotions as well. Okay, so I feel for the rider, I really do, especially when I find out her age. She's a young child. To be put through that is never correct, and that brings up conversations in its own right. But I also think that the fact is, we have to we are like the people we spend our time with. So if you are taking your horse or your dog into training with trainers and friends who think that is the way forward, you are always going to follow suit. You're going to put the same behavior into your training. If somebody says the answer to this is to pick your dog up by his ears and drag it back, then you will start seeing that as the normal behavior when your dog needs correcting. And no one in our group do we say do not correct. We tell people to correct all the time. But you can correct without being an asshole to your dog or your horse.
I agree with you 100%. You got so passionate there. It really came through. And all the time you were saying that, the two words that were sticking in my head was peer pressure. When you're training in a group or with other people that treat their dogs in that way, I think it almost becomes peer pressure, because you're like, if I want to get the result, I've got to do what they're doing. No, you don't have to. In fact, don't. Prove that it can be done nicely. I think it's really difficult because people look at trophies and rosettes as a form of how good is that person. Actually, just watch videos of their dog's training. Watch their dog's body language. Does the dog look happy? Is the tail wagging? Is the dog presenting a nice delivery with a happy face and forward ears and everything about that dog saying, I'm having the best time of my life? Or does the dog look like it's doing it through fear? And I think if you paid more attention to the dog's body language in that, so both dogs could be doing the same retrieve. Okay, let's take winning rosettes and trophies out of the equation. Two dogs doing the same retrieve. Watch the body language, decide for yourself what you would prefer your dog to look like. And I think that's what you should be looking at. I think that's really important. Just a little caveat on that. Watch the masterclass on dog's body language, because there's a big difference between appeasement and fear. And I think that people need to be knowledgeable about that. Otherwise, you might start judging somebody incorrectly. Maybe their dog just is a submissive dog who has appeasement behaviours because it's just the way the dog is genetically, not because it's been harshly handled. There's a difference, and you'll see the difference. And once you recognise the difference, then you can start to go, okay, so that person's training methods are obviously very kind. The dog looks happy. The dog wants to do the job. There's no fear involved in that.
But I think some animals are very much like humans. We'll put up with anything. Sometimes you see people where they're just quite nervy and they're quite timid in themselves, and you might never have done anything to them, but they're just that way in their behavior. So I think we do need to know about that. But I also think that, as in relation to our conversation today, and I'm sure our listeners will share their experiences and send in information to us, it's a case of working with the dog you have in front of you. How many times do we say it? If your dog is a very biddable, very shy, very held back dog, it's even more important then that you are calmer in your behavior and more patient and more relaxing to bring the best of that dog. That dog can win rosettes, that dog can win championships with the correct behavior used to train them.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think, and this is exactly it, working with the dog in front of you is the way to stop this kind of, is it a culture? I think it's a culture of, oh, that dog's not good enough and that dog is good enough. No, work with the dog in front of you. Every dog, okay, I'm going to reverse that. Not every dog, but the majority of dogs have the capability, if the handler understands the dog and trains the dog in a way that benefits that dog can work with and that brings out confidence obedience, because obedience is part of it, but you don't have to be harsh to get an obedient dog. But you need to build confidence as well to have that really good working relationship with that dog. You've got to build its confidence as well as instill good manners and obedience and the training program. And like we said earlier, you're building from the foundations up, layer by layer, brick by brick. And if you do that, you're going to run far less risk of things going wrong and even needing to get angry and frustrated. If you skip parts of the training and you try and run before you can walk, then things will go wrong. And that's when a lot of people, I feel, get frustrated because they blame the dog instead of recognizing there are perhaps holes in the training.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said about watching that video, there was obviously some gap in training there or some gap in understanding, because I don't at any one point think the horse, the rider, or the trainer knew why the actual whipping was taking place. I was like, there seemed to be no logic. There wasn't even logic in the whipping being used. It just seemed madness. So I've been out of the riding game for a long, long time. I don't know if they have the polar opposites we have in dog training with positive only, or the other complete other end, like beat the dog to death. But I'm just like, surely whoever you are and whatever you are trying to get out of your animal, some common sense has to apply of what is my intentions in this moment with this relationship.
Yeah, 100%. And like you, Joe, I haven't been in the horse world for a long time now. But I do know people that are still in the horse world, and I believe that they do have the exact same polar opposites in training, and they do have that kind of 4-3 positive only side versus the more, let's say, traditional or even down as harsh. I think it's so difficult because I hate camps and talking about camps, and I think this is why I'm so passionate about what we say. What we say is we work with the dog in front of us. We've touched on before on live Q&As and in other podcasts. With some dogs, I probably am completely force-free because that dog is that dog that is very biddable and shows very appeasing behaviour. And with other dogs, I might need to take a much firmer stance, but never harsh. And I think this is like, regardless of what industry, whether it's the horses or the dogs, working with that animal that's in front of you, that dog or that horse that's in front of you, and understanding what it is they're saying to you. And if they don't understand, I genuinely don't think I've met very many dogs who purposefully, and when I say purposefully, mean dogs that would literally just be like, I don't care what my handler says, I'm doing my own thing. It's usually lack of training. It's usually lack of training or lack of understanding of the training. Obviously, you get dogs that are more problem solvers. So they're the sort of dogs that often get labelled as being, and we talk about this in a masterclass we've got coming out very soon, but these dogs that are problems, they use more inference. That's what they call it. And to your average Joe, somebody might label that dog as self-employed because the dog is a problem solver, because it's out there and it's working it out for itself. And then you get the dogs that are more memory based, and those dogs are the ones that will look more biddable, and they'll repeat the thing that you've taught them over and over because that's how that dog is. And I think if we can look at it more like that in terms of how does this dog learn, instead of labeling them a good dog or a bad dog and then treating them unfairly, it would be much nicer for everybody all round if they just understood the dog and how the dog learns.
I completely agree. And we've got the podcast on square peg in a round peg in a square hole. I think it's that way around.
That's the one.
And that's the reality as well, though, isn't it? It's knowing, can your dog really hit the level you want it to? And to be fair to that dog, because not every child born is going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and that's fine, and we accept that. And we understand that everybody will find their passion and hopefully and work in what brings them the most joy. with Gundog breeds, especially where they are incredibly well bred, working dogs from working lines, there's this sort of belief that all of them should be able to do it. That isn't the case.
No, some dogs make incredible working dogs, but they're not really cut out for the working test land. Other dogs are really great in working tests, but they don't work brilliantly out in the field. They're all unique. Some just want to be a sofa dog and just go for nice walks and enjoy the occasional retrieve. And so, yeah, that podcast we did was, I think, a really popular podcast, wasn't it? Square peg, round hole, or the other way round. But I think it's always worth considering that, because are you trying to create something in that dog? That dog just isn't. But equally, don't just use that as an excuse for a lack of understanding and training. And I think that's where reading the dog, understanding the dog, and looking at the dog and seeing if there's passion there and if the dog just doesn't get it. And I mean, you know, sometimes I work with dogs that are slightly older and the owner wants to get into the gun dog work. And you can tell within 2 or 3 sessions whether that dog's loving the work or not. But because they haven't maybe done it from a puppy, you might have to go into it slightly differently. But don't rule a dog out just because of lack of understanding. Be fair to the dog. Always be fair to the dog.
Fabulous. I think that hopefully we've given our listeners something to think about there. Some ideas about like how to recognize when you're losing your temper, how to step away from that, and how to just have the ability to see when it's going completely wrong, to have the sense to walk away from that, and not to make this like a permanent argument between you and the dog, because no good is ever going to come of it. We encourage our listeners to interact with us on social media. We're on Instagram at Ladies Working Dogs, and we're on Facebook, the Ladies Working Dog Group. Let us know what you think, where you think, if you are struggling, ask us if we can help, because the reality of it is, if you are in that position where you feel like you and the dog's relationship's broken down, there is a podcast about I don't like my dog at the moment. Go listen to that, but get in touch with us and see if we can help. Thank you, Claire, for another interesting podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed chatting to me as much as I've enjoyed chatting to you. I think we like to view our things in this because we are both really passionate about the fact that you can correct positively in a way that is helpful to the dog, and you can reward in a way that accelerates the dog's learning. And in all of this, with a little bit of patience, a little bit of consistency, you don't need to resort to harsh handling.
% Joe, I couldn't agree more. And I'm like you, I'm so passionate about it. And it probably shows because I get on a real rant and a rave about it when I'm chatting. But yeah, the more we can educate people, the better. And I think that's what this podcast is great for. We just get the opportunity to share experiences and educate people.
Fabulous. I hope you've all enjoyed. We hope you have a fabulous weekend, and we shall speak to you all next week for another episode of Found It Fetched It. Bye all. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together, because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.